Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, and this week joining us from, unlike his name would suggest, Auckland, New Zealand, Jakub Jurkiewicz. Hi Jakub, welcome to the show.
Hi Vasco, how are you?
I'm good. So Jakub is currently a kaizen practice lead. He participated in his first stand-up in 2005 and facilitated his first retrospective in 2007. Previously a software developer, team leader, Scrum Master, and Agile consultant, Jakub is also a podcaster and a trainer at Agile Coaching Labs. He says he loves wine, bicycles, and his wife in the reverse order. So, Jakub, that was a short intro to you and what you do. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my journey through Scrum Mastery and Agile Coaching started in 2010. And my first role as a Scrum Master was in a startup back in Poland. And at the same time, I was doing my PhD studies and I was teaching software engineering at the university back in Poznań in Poland. And the main topic, or some of the main topics of my research and my classes were about agility. And so when I joined the startup, it was pretty obvious that we would need to use Agile approach to our work. And because I was the one who knew all of these things about Scrum and extreme programming, we decided that I would play the role of a Scrum Master for our small team. And that's how I started. That's what kind of got me to Scrum and kind of more practice approach to Agile.
That's quite a different journey than most of us have. I mean, we've heard here on the podcast, many of us have accidentally bumped into the Scrum Master role, but you were kind of being prepared since a few years before you did your first Scrum Master to be a Scrum Master. I mean, you were studying it, you were probably writing about it, talking to other people about it, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And I was doing research about it and having a lot of discussions with one of the professors who was my supervisor and some of the colleagues at the university. And I even remember the first time I heard about Agile, and it's been such a strong experience that I totally remember almost the day or the moment of it when I was sitting in a class of software engineering, and the professor who later became my supervisor, he basically was talking about, different approaches like Prince2 or original unified process and all of these different more traditional approaches. And I think he spent 2 lectures explaining the extreme programming and Scrum and all the things behind Agile Manifesto. And it was in 2003, so it was still pretty new in the market and in the industry. So he was bringing us the newest things so that we can learn. And I was just fascinated about all of these things. And I thought that it all made sense. So I wanted to try it.
Absolutely. And try it, you did. And let's talk now about one of those trial and error situations. On Monday, of course, we talk about failure story, things we learn through our own misfortune and sometimes just lucky accidents that happen. So tell us that story, Jakub, a story of a moment where you as a Scrum Master, you did your best, but at that time you were still on your learning journey. So tell us the story and then we'll dive into the details.
Yeah. Well, after I left the startup, which to be honest, the startup was a great learning experience. And I was lucky enough that we could experiment a lot and we could be truly cross-functional team, having a great mission. And then we were doing all the things that we could to survive as a startup and to be close to the customers. And we pivoted a couple of times and that was a great experience. So after I left the startup, I joined a software house, which was about 70 people. It was still back in Poland. And It was a couple of months after I had done my certified Scrum Master training and certified Product Owner trainings. So I thought I was on top of the world. I have conquered Scrum. That was kind of my my feeling at that time. I knew everything. So when I was talking to this company about them hiring me, they were saying that they had 7 teams, and I would be working with 7 teams, and I would be the sole Scrum Master for the whole company. So with all of that excitement after the training and with my huge ego at that time, I decided to take the job. And I thought I would be perfect for it. And as you can imagine, it was a total failure. First of all, it was not possible to work with 7 teams at the same time. I realized this about maybe my first week. And there was no way for me to provide a good service for them. Second of all, I was too proud at that time to admit my own failure and my own shortcomings. And I was blaming everyone around me for this. So I was blaming the CEO, the teams, the product owners, the clients, but I couldn't see any blame in myself, which looking now back at it, 10 years back, it was on 7 years back, it was pretty sad. Yeah, so after a few years, I was able to meet a lot of really great Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, and I started reflecting on this experience, and I realized that I was pushing instead of allowing the team to pull my help and me, and the knowledge and experience. Scrum became the outcome I was after instead of, looking at the business outcomes. And yeah, I learned also that I constantly need to inspect and adapt my own approach, and I need to constantly reflect and find better ways of being a Scrum Master. So big lessons from this.
Absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind is, we hear quite a lot, at least I do hear that question, like, how many teams can a Scrum Master work with effectively? And of course, some people say 2, some people say 1, whatever camp you're in. I don't think anyone says 7 teams is the right number.
I know.
We talk about 7 people in the team, but not 7 teams.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about that is, how did it feel though? Like, what was it to work with that many teams? Like, how was your average day?
It was overwhelming. And I was not able to really pay attention to anything. I was just running from one sprint event to another and trying to make sense out of it. And because, before I had my experience with a startup company, which was a small company, now suddenly, and I was in one team, suddenly I had 7 teams. And again, because I was so proud of myself, it was very hard for me to see that there is a different way to do things. So it was very hard, very overwhelming, and very hard.
The other aspect you talked about, you were too proud to admit your failures. And I think every one of us has been there and has done that, whatever the failure has been. Usually that leads to failure, right? So very often when we look back, there's probably a little bit of pride when a failure happens as well. But I think this is a very important aspect, especially for our Scrum Master friends who maybe have a couple of years under their belt and they feel confident, because you can't be proud if you don't feel confident. What advice do you have for Scrum Masters that might feel that they are acting proud, or maybe they don't even recognize the symptoms of acting proud? Like, how did you realize that? What were the things that when you look back told you that, okay, I was too proud to reflect, I was too proud to learn, I was too proud to change? So tell us how you recognize that, and also what advice you have for our friends Scrum Masters.
So for me, it was when I met a fellow Agile coach here in New Zealand. So that was about, I think, 3 years later, maybe. And I started working with him, and I started realizing that he had a totally different approach than I used to have. And I started seeing some of the things he was doing, or things he was not doing, and normally I would do. And I started reflecting on that, and I started seeing through also conversations with him, I started then reflecting, that maybe I was doing things wrong. And it allowed me to, just through observations and through having a good mentor and a good coach, I started realizing that there is much more to being a Scrum Master than what I thought it was, in 2012 or 2013. So that was a big learning for me. the advice that I would give to Scrum Masters would keep reflecting. I think that's a huge practice, huge discipline we should, all of us should have, making sure that we reflect, if not daily, at least weekly. Reflect on the goals, on our accountabilities that we have as Scrum Masters, reflecting on how we want to show up and making sure that we are actually showing up the way how we want to, and if we didn't, how we can improve. Connecting with ourselves, being mindful about how our stance as Scrum Masters. So making sure we are paying attention to all of it and having time to reflect and having time to think. And even sometimes reflect, how can I get feedback? How can I become better Scrum Masters? Who can I talk to? Who could I observe maybe that I could take some inspiration from them?
Absolutely. Reflect on how to collect that feedback from the people around you. Definitely peers, as you said, like that Agile coach friend that you started to learn from, but also, of course, the teams themselves, right?
Of course, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story, Jakub.
No, happy to share.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests help their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.